young man, and God told Abraham to give his son to him as a sacrifice. And as we go through the lesson, and what I read, by going through the lesson, some would interpret the lesson, who do you love more, me or your son? But what God showed, but what came to me was not so much who do you love more, but do you trust me? Because you remember, God told Abraham that he was going to make a great nation out of his loin, which was Isaac. Now, and if God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac to him, that and it had to be Abraham's faith to know that, okay, I know, God, what you told me, and the natural mind will say, if I sacrifice him, then where's this great nation gonna come from? I was already 99 years old when I had the boy. Now I'm well up into my hundreds now at this point. If I sacrifice him, where's it going to come from? So God was just trying to, not that he didn't already know, but was trying to more illustrate, do you trust me? And God will do us the same way when he puts stuff into our hands. When he blesses us with the house money, the cause money, we don't have to really materialistically want for anything anymore. He'll test us to say, okay, do you trust me, or do you trust those things more than me? My blessings more than me. And if we go into the lesson here, I'm just starting at verse 1. This is Genesis chapter 22, starting at verse 1. It does read, and it came to pass after these things, the Lord did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, I am here. Tempted Abraham. And Abraham answered and said, behold, here am I. And then Abraham, of course, as T.J. illustrated, came out of his own land and was actually, I believe at this time, in the land of Canaan, living, passing through it. The Lord was taking Abraham through where his descendants was going to take place after they got delivered out of the land of Egypt. And as the author illustrates, and I'm coming out of course, the student book, I'm just going to start at the second paragraph. So when Abraham was 99, the Lord appeared to the patriarch and renewed the covenant that was found in Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 through 19. Abraham was promised that he would be a father of many nations, and the Lord changed his name to Abraham to reflect this. His wife Sarai, at the time that was spelled with an I, was also given a new name, Sarah. And that also happened in that same chapter, verse 15 of that chapter, Genesis chapter 17. Before long, the Lord appeared to Abraham and Sarah and told them that they would have a child within a year. Of course, after that year, the Lord did bless, and I'm paraphrasing now, the Lord did bless Abraham and Sarah with that child. And they named that child Isaac, which actually means, I guess, in the Hebrew, laughter, or he laughs. Because and Abraham, of course, shares with his wife, and the reason why they named him that is because after Abraham expressed his wife what the Lord had promised to them, it said that Sarah laughed about it, her being of age. She's like, wait, I'm old, I ain't never had a child in my life, and I'm going to have a child. And I'm pretty sure that was funny to us, so that's why they named him Isaac, and that's what it means. The offering of Isaac, this is in the fourth paragraph, the offering of Isaac occurred after these things, but the author illustrates it, but we do not know the age of Isaac at the time of the events. During some of my studies, there was some who said that Isaac at this time had actually kind of grown to be almost to the age of a teenager, somewhere in the age of somewhere between 10 and 12 years old. Which also lets me further know that doing this, Isaac had to have some idea that what was about to take place, but at the same time doing that because of his faith in his father, which as the author illustrates a little bit later, the trust that he had in his father, he wasn't fearful, he didn't try to run away or anything like that. Going to verse 2 of Genesis chapter 22, it says, and he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and give thee into the land of Moriah, offer him therefore a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And it skips down to verse 6. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? But this time, this is Isaac. I was speaking, to his father, like, I know, I'm pretty sure, he's been around, his father, and they've done offerings and sacrifices, and he knows it's a custom to bring an animal, to be sacrificed unto God. So at this point, he's asking, what was a sacrifice? You got everything for a sacrifice, but I don't see it. And in verse 8 of that same verse, Abraham answers his son and said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. Of course, so they went both forth together. Even in that verse, and this is after God had talked to Abraham and told him that I want you to sacrifice your son unto me. What was telling about this was God told Abraham to sacrifice his son, but what I'm hearing in verse 8 is God is going to make a way. God is going to provide himself a sacrifice. So, and of course, in verse 9, does read, and it came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar therefore, and laid the wooden order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And again, reading out of the student book, under the one that says God's provisions, that was Genesis chapter 22, verses 6 to 8, which I just read. And the author says, not only did Abraham obey the Lord especially by departing from the place of the sacrifice, but he also took with him all the things necessary to accomplish this task. This included the wood for the offering, a fire pot for turning the wood, the knives to slay the sacrificial victim, and of course Isaac the sacrifice. Skipping to the third paragraph, it says, apparently Isaac so trusted his father that no decision of the specific sacrifice to be offered arose in their conversation. Now, however, as they ascended the hill where the sacrifice was to occur, Isaac said, where's the lamb for the burnt offering? And this is illustrated. And the Lord dealt with me with, another thing, that we sacrifice to God. We make our own sacrifice to God on a daily basis, whether it's our time, whether it's tithes and offerings, which is the first, because in the Old Testament teachings, sacrifices were the first of anything you got. So the first fruit of your crops, the firstborn of your calves, things like that, and that's why tying in the tithes goes the same way. You're supposed to give God the first tenth of what you get. Not what you earn, what you get, what you get too. It's also sacrifice. And what's here, the next one says, Abraham answered. It would be, and this is illustrated out of Genesis chapter 22 and 8. It would be interesting to know that was going on in the mind of Abraham at this time. As noted earlier, he apparently believed that if he did offer his son as a sacrifice, God will raise him up. That's faith. To know that, or to believe that, to say. Without expert commentary, we are left to ponder the thoughts of Abraham. As a matter of fact, just skipping a few sentences here. When Abraham finally speaks, he replies to Isaac questions. The final outcome of the story. When and with these other things, the Lord ways when He speaks or when He tells us to do things. I was just thinking about just times and when the Lord speaks to me about certain things, and to really stand and trust God, and that's what really hit home about this, that Abraham just not really, really more so about Abraham's faith. That's not really what struck me. It was his trust in God. And to have that much trust in God, you have to have a relationship with Him, a strong one. I'm like praying, fasting, strong relationship with God to believe what He says in His Word and what He tells you. I remember just times where God would speak, something to me. The incident with my car. I mean, with my battery, my car wouldn't start, and Lord told me to get my crowbar and begin to hit the negative and positive of my battery. That's something that was not that normally wouldn't come to an average person to do that. I don't think even a mechanic working on the car for 30 years would have told me to do that. But because of now the wisdom of God and how when He brings things to us, if you trust Him and of course you believe what He says, you're willing to do it. And that's what Abraham did here. Even though God had blessed him with the son that He promised him years ago, when he first and God blessed him with him and told him that He was going to make a great nation, he was still willing to sacrifice his son, even if that meant him believing that God was going to raise Isaac from the dead. And that's strong faith, that's strong belief. Yeah. I couldn't even fathom the Lord telling me to sacrifice my son to Him, and I know that it takes a God type of faith and trust to be able to do something like that. And I apologize. I had written something down that also Abraham. Next illustration of the verse, I'm just going to read verse 9 from chapter 22, and it says, "They came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and of course laid and bound Isaac on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth the knife from his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him," this is in verse 11, "called out to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I." And at this time, again, they had got to the place where God had pointed out to Abraham to sacrifice his son. And doing some research and studying that, some people even believe that was the same place that later Solomon had built his temple, for the Lord at. And doing that, and right when he was about to go through with the act of saying the son, the angel of the Lord came and spoke to him and told him not to do it. And because at that point Abraham had proved that his belief in God, and that's how God will test us. God is not with the first I illustrated earlier. God will test us not so much to see if we're going to sin, but to see how much we really trust Him, how much we depend on Him. And I'll give you a good illustration. God will take from you different things and put you in a certain place, one, to test your faith, and to, of course, build your trust in Him. I'm like, well, why I'm at now? If 2 years ago, if you would have told me that I wouldn't have had no car, that I wouldn't have had, that I would have lost the place I stayed at, that the bank account I had would have dry, nothing in it, that I even would have been staying with someone else 2 years ago, I would have told you, get away from here, the devil is a lie, and all that type of stuff, because I believe that to be true. But God will take things from you just to test you, and not that He doesn't already know where you're at, because He knows where you're at, He knows what you're going to do, He knows all, but just to see, just to show to you, do you really trust me? That stuff that you're preaching and that you tell everybody when you're doing good, when you ride high, that God is a way maker, God is a provider, He'll do for you. Are you still going to say that same thing when you can barely, when you don't have cheese to put on your sandwich?
Amen.
When you only have, when you can't even, the glass of water that you got to drink, that's the only water you got. Are you going to still say those same things when you get your paycheck from your job, and as soon as you get your paycheck gone. You ain't had time to nothing. You still gonna say God is good, God's a way maker, God will provide. God is my strength and my source. And that's exactly what he was doing with Abraham here. He was just trying to sort of, Abraham, do you really trust me? Do you believe what I told you? Do you believe that I am going to make you a father of many nations? Do you believe that I said that through your womb I'm going to make your name great? Do you really believe that? Or once you get the blessing, are you just going to turn and forget what I just said and start leaning by your own understanding? Yes. Because see, if Abraham would have, said, well, by his own understanding, well, God, you told me you was gonna make my name great, and that through my son, you was gonna make this great nation, and if I sacrifice him, there ain't gonna be no great nation. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna sacrifice something to you, but see if you would have did that. And again, God did say that, but at the same time, he would have showed his trust more so in what he had, not so much what God said. And that's the thing that, our pastor here also, illustrates us and been doing it from day one. That, it's not about what you see, it's not about what you have. It's about knowing that God is going to make a way for you. When I was going through an issue with my job where it didn't look too good, I had faith that even if the Lord, as my job went away, that God was still going to provide for me, my son, and my wife and my family. I still had that faith because why? My faith is not in my job, it's in God who blessed me with that job. So it's going to put it there in the first place. The author really illustrates the student in his outline of God protection. Then I'm going to get down to the second paragraph there, and it says the first thing, of course, Abraham did was build an altar. This would have been a stone altar prepared specifically for sacrifice. Of course, as we know with altars, back in the Old Testament, that's where they laid the victim's body and they killed them, and they burnt them for burnt sacrifice to God. Isaac, which was Abraham's son, willingness and all of this remains a mystery to some, and to some, as the author illustrates. And to me, it just further illustrates his faith, because, and it's funny, the more, and I get to see, with Isaac being around his father so much, and Abraham being a father of faith, I can just see that rub-off effect. I'm saying that, Isaac being around his father having so much faith and trust in God, it just rubbed up on Isaac. So when his father told Isaac, hey, when he laid him on that altar and he pinned him down, and at this point Isaac had to know, I'm the sacrifice. That because of the faith and everything, that that raw fact that he had from his father, he was still willing to trust his father. He didn't struggle, and of course he could have ran away. Abraham was old, he wasn't young. So I'm pretty sure Isaac wanted to run away. He probably could have got away. But because of the faith he had in his father, and of course his faith he has in God, because I believe even at that point, even when Isaac was a little boy, he still had faith, and he had faith in God as well. And of course, him being an obedient son and fully trusting in the wisdom of his earthly father, he, as the writer illustrates here, he must have, of course, been complacent regarding the events that were about to occur. Of course, also the author goes illustrates this, which I did do some research on this, and that's true that back in the Canaanite area, that they did human sacrifice, that was sacrificed to him. So I guess the author illustrates that maybe Isaac was thinking that maybe it's just my turn to be sacrificed. Nevertheless, though, the boy's faith in his father and his trust in God did not make him struggle. All Abraham knew, and this is at this time after he had laid Isaac on the altar, there was two things. A, God's plan, the future around Isaac, and B, God wanted him to sacrifice Isaac. He could not reconcile the two but he would obey God anyway. That's faith. That's what faith is. Faith is twofold. Faith is one, trusting in God and trusting on His Word, and two, standing on His Word even though something may come, as our First Lady pointed out. You know, when God blesses us with things, it is for us and it is right for us to turn around and give it back to God. Basically, telling God, you know, I put this in your hands. That I know you gave this to me, but I'm trusting you to help grow the church. For example, the same thing the pastor did with this church. God gave Pastor Johnson a vision for God's Excellency Bible Fellowship Church that we're sitting in right now. God, you know, blessed him with that vision, told him how to do the church, how to build, how to put it in place and everything. But at the same time, Elder Johnson turned right back around and said, okay, God, you gave it to me, but I'm going to give it back to you because this is your church.
Amen.
That is you going to help us grow this church. It is you that's going to bring in souls.
That's right. Amen.
It is you who's going to put money in the church bank account. So that way we can start outreach ministry to reach other families, to be able to go out and help people that are in need. To get everything we need for the church, whether it be our Sunday school books, our Bibles, our witnessing cards, our prayer cards, anything like that. That's the equivalent of turning around and giving the God hand. God, when you bless me with that house, God, I'm going to turn back to you. That it is you who's going to help me pay this rent. Who's going to help me pay the mortgage on my house, pay the taxes on my house. It's you who's going to help keep everything in this house fixed, or at least provide me with the money to fix it when it gets broken. That's the type of faith you have to have. You can't have the type of faith the world has that, you know, and it's good. I'm not saying it's good to plan and to save money and everything like that. I'm not saying, you know, just you can still do that and that's fine, that's wisdom. But at the same time, even with all your saving and things, you still have to have faith in God that He's going to provide. That it's not the money that you save, that it's God who's going to make your way.
Amen.
Through everything, and that's God's protection. This is exactly what they also illustrate. And when you do that, God will protect everything that you bless. Everything that you bless, everything that God blesses you with, if you turn around and give it to Him, He'll put that protection over him. That's how He did Job. Everything that Job had at the time, God had a hedge around it. It was protected. The devil couldn't get to it, couldn't touch it. And he couldn't touch it until God, took His hand off of it. And I know that in the book of Job, it didn't illustrate to God, but I just believe that Job had turned around and gave all those things to God, and that's why he was so protected. In verses 10 and 11 of chapter 22 in Genesis, I'm just read most of verse 12, and it does really, he said, lay not thou hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withstood thy son, thy only son from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes, and this is verse 13, and looked, and behold, a ram caught in the thicket by the horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him a burnt offering, and the steed instead of his son. And of course, Abraham called the name of that place that they were at Jehovah, Jireh. And it said to this day, in the mountain of the Lord, as it shall be seen. And that's where we get Jehovah Jireh, God provider.
Amen.
My provider.
Amen.
And the author, and we're again reading from the student book, in the part where it says Abraham's interrupted. Just before Abraham struck the final blow, the angel of the Lord spoke to the patriarchs from heaven above. The angel of the Lord is often used, of course, quite often in the Bible. Some believe, of course, that the angel of the Lord was the patriarch, the Son of God, which is Jesus Christ. And Abraham's response to the call, the angel told him, lay not thy hand upon the lad. As we learned from the beginning that this was a test of faith. Abraham, of course, did not know, nor was he assured he would not have to literally sacrifice his son. Let's skip down to the third paragraph. Abraham was willing to offer up his son of promise, and the matter indicates his great fear of God. Indeed, to be truly God-fearing is to trust and to obey the Almighty. Mm-hmm. This is certainly one of the major reasons Abraham is set forth in the Old Testament as an example of faith to us all. And the one thing again that you guys saw me, because I remember I was studying the lesson, and every time I've ever read this, the thing that came to me the whole time was that God was trying to show trying to show whether not Abraham loved him more or his son more. And I remember as I began to read and study this morning, God began to tell me and show me that it really wasn't so much does he love me more, did he love these things more than me? It was more so, do you trust what I say? And it struck me just what I myself going through my own life when I was younger, when God had saved me 5 years ago, and God had really started to bless me and my wife. I had two bank accounts that had money in it. Both of us were working in good jobs, making everything. But I found myself then more trusting in those things more than God. And a lot of the times, we get to the point where we say, well, when did I say that? I didn't say I trust these things with God, but it's not so much what you say, it's more so what you do. And I'll give you an illustration. I had got to the point where, and this is what I always say, and I fully believe this, that if you don't pay your tithes, you can't say you trust God. And I'll just explain why. Your tithes, when you give it back to God, just outside the fact that He commanded you to do it, you're telling Him, okay, God, that I'm taking from what you blessed me to earn and giving it back to you, so that way you can continue to bless the other 90% to provide for my family. And at the point I was not paying my tithes at that time. But at the same time, I was turned around and said, I trust God. And the Lord showed me that it doesn't work that way. That you can't sit there and say you trust me, but yet you won't do anything to my word. You don't pay your tithe. You don't give your offering. And then you make excuses saying, well, I have to do this, I have to do that. And Abraham could have did that too. God, you said I got to make, I'm going to have a great nation. I can't sacrifice my son. If I sacrifice my son, I'll never have that great nation. Mm-hmm. But it was because of his faith that he was able to, he was willing to go through with it. Even though, of course, God, and see, that's a thing that I love about God, that when you are doing everything to do according to faith, when you're paying your tithes and everything, when you're giving your offering, when you're standing on what the Word say, that He will pour you out the blessings you not have roots enough to receive. That if you continue to do that, He'll give you your ram in the bush when you think things is going to cave in on you. He'll instead of you, when you think you're about to have to pawn your TV or your computer to be able to do anything after you just paid your tithe and you paid your tithe instead of paying your light bill. And at this point, you done got to a road where, Lord, I'm going to have to pawn this TV because I don't send all the way. Well, God will come in and make another way for you to pay your light bill and still keep your TV so that way you can watch it with it being on. I said, and that's, of course, if we just do what God says and we stand on His word and we believe what He says, that He'll continue to make a way. God bless Him.